knew I wanted to implement the Cheshire Cat. I knew that was the design. The next step was like, what the hell am I going to do about it? I went through the motions of talking to people about paint, airbrush, etc. I've done a ton of work in action sports. I've worked with Red Bull a lot over the years. And I said, you know what, I'm going to call my buddy Ryan Runke down there at Red Bull and see who the heck he's working with and who's wrapping their planes, who's wrapping their helis, and what the process is that goes along with that. So I put in a call to Ryan. Hey Ryan, I got this project. You got to call my buddy Erik in Long Beach. He is the man when it comes to aviation and wrapping. Anyway, so okay, give me his email address. I shot a note to Erik. Next thing I know, very quickly, the phone rings and Erik's calling back.
My name is Erik Bond, Spin Imaging Inc. We are basically a specialty large format company that was created in action sports and kind of moved into the aerospace world over the past 17 years. Pretty much take on only everything aerospace and then some architectural mural projects and stuff like that. We started in action sports, kind of moved through the ranks and got introduced to Virgin Galactic, which we pretty much do all of the aircraft for Virgin Galactic now. There's 8 companies in the U.S. that are allowed to print and produce for commercial industry aircraft on a passenger jet. We basically took that and ran with it for the private sector aerospace. So Virgin Galactic and Richard Branson came to us and said, hey, we want to take this a step up and use this on spaceship. So we developed over the past 14 years, we developed materials that'll withstand the speeds and temperatures of space flight. And when you get up to those speeds and altitudes, there's zero tolerance for failure. I think Mike found us actually through the channels of aerospace. And I have a mutual friend, Greg Simkins, better known as Craola, who's a really high-end artist. There's a lot of very whimsical and really creative, Alice in Wonderland-y kind of Cheshire Cat stuff. So we commissioned him to basically do a painting.
My name's Greg Simkins. I'm an artist. People call me Craola because of my graffiti past. I've been painting and drawing since I was a little kid, but really focused, professional, doing art since I was 18. So I met Erik Bond years ago just through a possible job we were gonna do. It was a possible mural/wrap that was being tossed around in Hermosa Beach that never came about. But I was able to meet him through the process, and we hit it off pretty quickly, and we just started talking about possible projects we could work on. A couple things came up, didn't come through, and then all of a sudden I get a phone call or a text that, hey, I got to talk to you about this project with this dude, Mike, that you got to meet. I'm like, okay, what's it about? He's like, well, it involves a Cheshire Cat and an airplane. I'm like, you got me in. You sucked me in right away. So the possibility of having my artwork wrapped on a plane just sounded interesting. And the content that Mike wanted it's right up my alley. So Cheshire Cats, Wonderland kind of themes. I'm always painting that kind of stuff. So when we sat down and talked, we hit it off pretty quickly and just started designing the image to go on it. And then we turned it into a personal painting for his home that would be scanned and then wrapped around his plane. The rough idea, if it doesn't pop in my head when a project comes up, I usually don't do the project. Just from talking to him, the image popped in my head immediately. I knew what it was going to be. Tweaks on angles and poses, that comes later, but the rough has to be able to just pop in my head. That's how I usually work. If I'm working with a client, I usually have to see it within the first day or so of just thinking about it. And I try to sneak up on it. I try not to focus too hard on it. I just try to start doodling and let it kind of sneak up in the back of my head and go, oh, there it is. And that's when I know it's going to happen. It's going to be a cool project. And this came really quickly. So I'm like, oh yeah, there's going to be a tree. The cat's going to be posed on the tree. He wants these other couple elements in there. That's simple. I'm going to put a dodo bird in there. Never painted a dodo bird before, so I was able to do that. There was a lot of back and forth, but it makes sense because it had to fit a certain shape. I had to design the angle of the head on the cat. Everything had to be perfect because it had to fit this certain part on the tail, which makes total sense. So I set up a template based off templates he sent me, which thank God he's so savvy with design work. So he was able to send me templates and I could just create into those templates. So it was pretty easy. And then he had ideas he wanted. It's his plan. I'm like, send me your laundry list. We're going to make this happen. So yeah, we got through our back and forth notes, and then he just set me at it, and I just went to painting.
This will be the first cub we do. Although it's not exactly a composite body, there's some challenges in that it has a skin on basically a skeletal frame. So the procedures in which we apply a normal graphic this is a whole new territory. So as he came to us with the idea, Greg Simkins came down. We all three kind of had a powwow and came up with an idea that is going to blow some people's minds.
Yeah, so then fast forward a few months, back and forth with Greg, with Craola, I figured out the painting. Next thing I know, this 36 by 18 commission piece of art shows up, which is incredible. We worked with Erik to take that into studio, scan that at a resolution that could wrap like the Empire State Building. I couldn't even, broke my computer every time I tried to open it. File of every last brushstroke and detail and everything that came into it, because we really wanted to make it look like an art project on the side of this plane. Yeah, so logistically, once all the back components were done, we had the art, we had the guy who was going to wrap the plane, all those pieces were in place. Then I thought the easy part was coming up. Oh, we're going to fly down to spin, we're going to sit down with the guys, we're going to cut out a piece of vinyl, and we're going to go implement it on the plane. And that process was actually long and cumbersome and took a lot of work, and thank God to those guys for having top-notch setup. We flew down and arrived the plane was actually wrapped in Compton. Shop was in Long Beach, so we had a bunch of back and forth and driving around. The first thing we did, we showed up to the plane and we unraveled giant rolls of paper and cut those out and got pretty much as picture perfect template as we could, with all the little nuances of where the cable's wrapped and where the components on the back of the airplane, and got that all dialed. Then we went into Erik's shop, rolled that thing out, and started taking, just hand measurements of what, what we needed to set up. And I had a template that I had worked on the entire time, but it was based off just quick measurements and whatnot. So that paper template really helped. And we sat down and we started printing, like partially opaque prints and lining things up and making sure it all worked. We found a couple of flaws of where, some of the cropping and Photoshop work had to be done. So we fixed that stuff. And yeah, I sat down with his team there and we just pushed pixels, and we went to the printer and we went back to the, the cupboard and back to the computer, and, did that around about a handful of times. And once we had that pretty much all dialed, the process was to print the thing on the final vinyl. Then they ran it through a laminate press to put the matte finish on it. So from there it went up, had to prep the whole plane, every last panel, all along the top of the fuselage, back up over the rudders. Everything had to be lined with, the wire, the seamless tape. And so heat, razor blades, all that sort of stuff almost can't be used on the plane. So minimal heat was used, no razor blades, all the wire tape was used and applied, to the entire aircraft. I basically left the aircraft. We'd finished everything I needed to help out with and everything I needed to be present for. Handed the project off to Erik. Erik wrapped up the wrap. That went off to Compton, and those guys wrapped it. When I came back, the thing was done. And it was insane. It exceeded my expectations.